Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Plato's Thursday, the best way to spend your Thursday. By tuning in this week, your Thursday is approaching the purity of the perfect form of Thursday. So says Plato. I'm your host, Josh, and joining me is my co-host, Joseph. In this episode, we ask, what is behind the division between the right and the left? And is reconciliation possible? So, firstly, Joseph, what's your take on what's causing this division between us?
It's difficult to put it into, like a couple sentences because it's a very complex issue, Josh, but the differences of values becoming wider and wider, I would say, is the biggest cause of it. So you have the one side looking at things in a more traditional way, and the other side look at things in a more progressive way. And it's getting, one side is getting, or you could even argue actually both sides are moving further away from each other. And one side believes in things like the nuclear family unit and traditional ideas of sexual morality, and the other side believes in things like pride parades and transgenderism. These are incompatible views, and they cannot live together. And I really think that these things have only happened recently too, so it's hard to say where this will go or how long it can last. It really wasn't that long ago where both sides were at least closer together, where they had shared values like love of country and belief in the traditional family unit. But it seems like that things have just taken a sharp turn, and I'm not sure totally what the cause of it is, other than maybe social media and mainstream media and entertainment pushing these ideas on people. But it's a little hard to say. Not 100% sure, what's behind it beyond that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you raised some really good points. Social media and mainstream media are both some of the main culprits, in my opinion. I think what really divides us fundamentally has a lot to do with where we get our values from. So it's known in personality psychology that people on the right and the left typically have different personalities. One being more, hardworking and organized, preferring to have a structure and to follow rules, and the other being more open-minded and having a desire to pursue experiences and ideas. Now, I think that the creation of the internet has significantly accelerated the adoption of novel ideas, and that has kind of made the left evolve faster than otherwise would have. Whether you consider that a good thing or a bad thing, it's kind of started moving faster than it would have otherwise. And the right is not moving that fast. And I think out of kind of a reaction to the left, in some ways, a lot of people are becoming more conservative. Trust is lowered between the two sides lately. And mainstream media, and this is why I'm glad you brought this up, because I totally feel like mainstream media has only incentive to make us more angry. And that they're doing a fantastic job at it.
Yeah, I mean, the mainstream media have a lot of incentive to keep us divided and push agendas. There's no denying that. It's pretty sinister. But on the other side, I also feel like people, don't really even trust the mainstream media that much, generally speaking. But the ones who do, they really do. And yeah, it's a problem for sure. And it's good to remember. I really wish people would just take a moment, breathe, relax, and always take what you're hearing with a grain of salt. Always look at the facts and think independently. And that seems to be something we're lacking. And your other point I think was interesting too, which is that I've moved a lot more to the right these last few years, and it was in response to the progressive culture that we live in. And I never would have cared about traditional marriage until recently. I always was, growing up, I always believed like, oh yeah, gays want to get married. That's fantastic. Who cares? That was always my attitude. And now I don't think of it that way anymore. The only marriage I recognize as a marriage now is between a man and a woman. I believe in the nuclear family unit. And I think anything else besides that is a perversion. And I would never have thought of it if I didn't see what happened when we took that step.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think the average normal person on your point about people not trusting the mainstream media, the average normal person understands that the media is very manipulative. I know somebody who used to work at a company writing news articles, and they would literally have AI kind of predict what would get the most responses to make the most clickbaity, grabby titles, and they specifically had a code for how they would write things to get reactions from people. And she thought it was horrible, and she quit. They very consciously are trying to manipulate people, and this was years before ChatGPT, by the way. Like this AI technology has even been part of it apparently for longer than most people realize. But most people understand that it's manipulative, and I don't think people generally want to be divided. And on your point about moving more to the right in response to the left, so I've got a question for what your experience was. Did it feel as though the left was reasonable until it went too far? And when it went too far, you felt that there needed to be a counterbalancing effect in society where we put forward traditional values harder?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Just slightly more specific, I'd say that before the left had this much cultural power, and before they moved this much to the left, their the selling point just seemed much more reasonable, which is just like, hey, let's live in a society where it's a free country, we have freedom of religion. It's like you don't have to agree with homosexuality. You don't have to. It's totally fine that you have your beliefs about it. But we just live, you live one way, I live another way. And we both live in a free country, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. And now that has really not turned out to be true. So the conservatives at the time who were criticizing this, who I did not like, by the way, I looked at them as like paranoid conspiracy theorists. Like, oh, well, right now they want gay marriage, but soon they're going to be teaching this to your kids. Just you wait. And then I was like, oh, get the hell out of here. That's not going to happen. You're just being paranoid. And not even they could have seen what we see now, which is a full-on indoctrination of the youth. We have seen a spike in LGBT identification amongst the youth of like 500%. I mean, I don't have the literal number in front of me, but it is so astronomical that it cannot even be ignored. And yes, there's so much evidence that this stuff is being pushed on kids, and they're really not even trying to hide it anymore. We could get into specifics later on, but the point I'm trying to make is when I saw their true intentions, and I see the horrific effects now, especially with like so-called gender-affirming care, which does include life-altering decisions of the body and things like that, which are so extreme that no one would have predicted it even like 5 years ago. That now, and I said, okay, yeah, I understand now where they were coming from and the need for tradition and kind of like those values that we used to rely on.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the right so this is kind of getting more into like personality psychology again. The right has a stronger sensitivity to disgust and this concept of contagion, whether it's psychological or not. And this is something that people don't realize. There's an incredibly good moral psychologist by the name of Jonathan Haidt. He's got really interesting work. And one of the things that he's kind of made people more aware of, I think, is the fact that disgust is very much a moral emotion. Conservatives tend to think more on a subconscious level in terms of contagion of ideas than people on the left do, in my opinion. Which is similar to, how someone would think in terms of contagion of physically disgusting things. I believe that the right tends to think more in a reactionary, slippery slope kind of way, where sometimes they can be, creating moral panics and can be irrational. But in this case, it's interesting because our perspectives are evolving so rapidly in society that it really is worth considering more the practical impacts of people's perspectives. And for the record, I'm a leftist. I'm 100% on board with LGBT stuff, although I very strongly dislike kids being taught things like that at a young age. I think they should remain apolitical as much as possible. And you shouldn't really talk about sexual topics any earlier than is necessary. And there's a lot of stuff that is being pushed that I think shouldn't be. So I'm not in favor of everything, but overall I do very much support progressive ideals. But man, it is so fascinating, like what technology is doing to the rapid evolution of our values.
Yeah, that is something we should actually dive deeper into. But before we do, I want to say that I think your point of view seems rational, which is that. So here's okay. So as far as this division amongst the right and the left, this is why I think a lot of it is not as bad as people maybe might think, because people like you and people like me, I can obviously see unity between and living in a country with, obviously.
Yeah, and that's part of why we wanted to start this podcast, is because you're on the right, I'm on the left, but we still have great conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And also, we're not irrational men. I'm not gonna look at you and say, oh, you're just a piece of shit, whatever, and you're not gonna do that to me. I think you and I both have fairly reasonable takes. Even the takes that we disagree with, I think we can at least understand where we're coming from, because most people are not on this kind of fringe thing. Like, how many people really on the left actually believe in teaching kids like about sexual issues at in kin? Because like if you think about that bill in Florida, for example, if most people on the left actually knew what the language of the bill said, they would have no problem with it. Period. They would not. All it said was you can't teach kids about sexual issues until they're if anything, I thought the bill was too mild, because it just says K through 3. So that's pretty young. I mean, that means that it wouldn't even exclude them from teaching kids sexually related topics at grade 4. That's how mild that bill was. And yet, look at the panic they created over it. There was another moral panic on the left, where they said, oh my God, they're going to say you can't even say the word gay. Don't say gay bill. It was a total fabrication of the truth. But my point I'm trying to make is, as far as division goes, the most people on the left, if they actually knew what it said, they're reasonable and decent enough people where they'd be like, oh yeah, of course you shouldn't be teaching kids about that. Most people on the left are not pervert, pedophile scumbags. Like the vast, vast majority of them are not. And the most people on the right are not Nazis. I don't know. So I think most of the, I think if you just talk with people, like you're just kind of a normal person, you just like have a conversation like, oh yeah, we're not actually that different. But these fringes and these narratives are kind of making it seem worse than it is. I don't know.
Yeah, so I haven't actually read that bill myself, but for the sake of discussion, I'm willing to say that at least if it's, the way you said it was, that is genuinely very mild, and sounds reasonable. I think that people on the right and the left, this happens both with social media and with mainstream media. People talk about issues in a way that gets more views. Or at least the ones who speak in the way that gets more views, they make more money. And it's come to a point where the people who make other people mad more, whether it's social media or mainstream media, are the ones who get popular. And that's a fundamental flaw. I think it really sucks. And there's a lot of why Donald Trump became so popular. He it's crazy. And obviously I really strongly dislike the man. But I think he knew what he was doing in saying some of what he said. I think he understood in his narcissistic mind, if I'm more popular, even if it's in a bad way, that will still help me. And in that sense, man, it's like, oh my God. It sucks how effective that kind of thing is. People who are hated are oftentimes the one that really get the most following.
Yeah.
Most people, when you talk to them in day-to-day life, they're reasonable, And in my experience talking to conservatives, I do have the perception that their perspectives are narrow-minded, but there's still people I can talk to and we'll come to a reasonable conclusion. But if you go on the left, they act like they're either stupid or evil or, on the line, on the internet, on the left, those act like they're the worst humans on earth. And of course on the internet on the right, which not to as much of a degree, maybe because, People on the right don't seem to be as impacted by internet culture, but people on the right, to some degree, still will act like all, left wingers are evil. Man, it's like the way to fix this is just somehow to get people to be able to have normal conversations again.
Yeah, I think that will be definitely. Yeah, let's get more into that when we reach our second topic. But I actually want to go into. So I think you raised a good point about wanting to make headlines that make people angry and are extreme to get more views and popularity. Because if there was just a news headline that says Florida Florida writes a bill that says that you can't teach students K-3 anything related to sexual topics of any kind. It's like people would just look at that and be like, okay. Ooh. Like, gee, that's really exciting. But if you create a narrative, oh my God, Florida has made it illegal to even say the word gay. They have said that if you even say the word gay, and they even made some ads with actors and everything, like skits, demonizing the bill. There was one I saw where a student was like talking about like being gay or something like that, and the teacher just asked her a question about like, oh, how long has this been happening? And then there's like an intercom like, Mrs. Whoever, come to the office now. Just because she said that. I'm like, that is so not what the bill was. It was just a total lie. But these are the things that are going to drum up the anger, and these are the things that are going to get you relevance, as sad as it is, rather than taking a more nuanced, just kind of just being accurate, just like, oh, okay, this is what it says. Okay, well, who cares? I'm going to move on. And you're right, by the way, about Trump. Even as someone who has voted for Trump twice, and I will vote for him a third time as well, if he's our nominee, which it very, very much looks like he will be. For the record, I'm more of a fan of DeSantis and even Vivek Ramaswamy. But the thing is, they are actually more conservative than Trump is. They full on are more conservative than Trump. And I would even argue they have better visions on how to enact conservative agendas, especially DeSantis with what he's done in Florida. And yet, like a huge majority of the conservative movement are not only behind Trump, but are like really behind Trump. So why is that? It's a personality thing. It's because he has a way of drumming that feeling up in them. It's almost like a cult. And you're right. You play on people's emotions. It's more powerful. And then those people are more passionate and vocal. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's that's a good point, and it's very sad. And everyone is kind of a stranger to everyone else, and so we kind of think, oh, you're conservative? I don't have to know you. There's a ton of people I can know on the left, and vice versa. And so we'll make entertainment out of demonizing people. The skit that you talked about. Again, I wish I had read the bill myself. I'm going to do it as soon as we're done recording, but people don't have a problem mocking the other side because they don't really need to know anyone on the other side these days. I think because of the internet and because of big cities, most people are strangers, and it takes a lot of work to make them not strangers. And we kind of find comfort in putting the other side down, and consequently, there's no trust between the two sides. So if you read something like "Don't say gay," and let's say hypothetically the bill is actually completely, what it says is completely appropriate, which it very well might be. I haven't read it, but if you're on the left, and even if it's exactly what you said, and there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever, just saying "don't say gay," if you have no trust in the right, you're immediately going to think, wow, yep, wouldn't put it past them to do this, Nazis, and you're going to immediately start attacking. And that's a problem, because if you don't have enough trust to even go and try to have a reasonable discussion and look into things, because I'm sure most people don't actually do the research, then there's a limited means of people to even come to a common understanding in the first place, let alone common opinions.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, actually. I think that the lack of... So, I think the best point you made there was you can easily attack the other side and other people when you don't even know them. When it's more of like an abstract idea, the left, the right, these are almost more of like concepts. And then you kind of create a straw man in your mind of what that is, and then you attack that. But then when you actually talk with people, you find out that it really just isn't the case. Like, there are people who I work with who I would bet dollars to donuts that if we met each other, if we knew each other online and that's all we kind of knew about each other, or they even just had an idea, like, let's say they didn't even know me online. Let's actually just say let's say they just let's just say someone just told them, like, hey, there's this guy who has these opinions, or maybe it voted for this person, or has this perspective, and then it's like, oh, I hate him, he's a Nazi, he's a scumbag, but then when they actually meet me, and talk with me and ask my opinion on things, they might be like, oh, actually, he's a pretty nice guy. I don't agree with him, but he's not a bad dude. You know what I mean? And vice versa, of course. Like, oh, this person, has the pride flag on their water bottle. Oh, I hate them. They're groomers. But then if I actually meet them and talk to them, I might be like, oh, actually, they're not. They're not pretty decent. It's a pretty nice person. So it is surprising, actually, if you really think about it.
It is weird. And, I honestly strongly believe that if me and you had met online, while it's possible we could have had a reasonable discussion, it would have been, a lot more... we would have been a lot more likely to think negatively of each other, I think. It would have just been because we happen to be reasonably civil people that we would have had the chance of having a good discussion. But I don't think we ever would have become friends online. And it's like, man, because it's so easy. Like, you meet someone online and you're like, oh, I'll talk to this person and I'll leave, But in person, you actually have something to invest in and to, like, try to understand. And it's just a completely different dynamic, and it's one that we evolved for. The way the internet is not something that we evolved for in the first place. And I think while I like the internet as a technology quite a lot, it's just been so difficult for us to come to terms with its impact on our culture in ways that we never could have understood.
Because there's no precedent to it. We've never had anything like this.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I'm an engineer, and the thing is, you never know necessarily what the implications of using a new system will be. It's very complicated, and things go wrong that you never could have imagined going wrong beforehand, and that's why you rigorously test everything. But, it's not like we can just test out, like boot up a containerized society and just test out internet on them before actually running internet on our main society, or socialism or anything else, whatever flavor of socialism people are proposing, which I am a socialist, for the record. I'm just, let's say, a cautious socialist.
We are the test subjects, is what you're saying. We are the test.
Yeah, exactly. We are the test. And we're not even fully aware of things that are happening as they're happening. They're bigger than all of us. And it's very weird to think about.
I think that's by the way, just so you know, that's a big reason I hate dating apps. Because there's so many times where you can't get to know someone through messaging them. Like, and seeing...
No, you can't.
You see some pictures and you send some messages. And there have been times when I've used dating apps in the past where I don't use them anymore, but I used to. And it would just be like, I'd be more... Like, we'd match, and then I'd be like, maybe we'll send one or two messages back together, and I'll be like, oh, do you want to go meet for coffee? So we can actually get to know each other. And they're like, oh, no, let's message more here first. I'm like, why? We're not going to get to know each other at all on here. We just have images, and then we're just sending text. It's just, you cannot become friends and form connections this way. You just can't. You got to actually talk to people. You actually got to meet them. You got to look them in the eyes. That's what being a human being is all about. And I'd argue that's what separates us from all other species on the planet. We have this connection. And it's being lost, I feel like, in the age of technology. And I do think that if it wasn't for that, I just don't see this kind of division even happening. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be the solution to that. Like, I don't know. It's because it's not like there's no way we're going to go back to... I guess this might be a good time to talk about potential solutions, but there's no way. It's not like we're going to go back in time and start using swords and spears again. It's like technology's here. So how do we manage it in a way that, what do we do about this?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I've got a few things I want to say. One is, women wanting to talk online more is understandable from my perspective. It's kind of a safety issue. Because again, and this is also because of the internet, if you talk to a guy in text, you don't know if he's safe yet just because you fucking texted him. You know what I mean? If you talk to the guy in real life, you'll get a feeling for if he's safe or not. So it's like, agreeing to go on a date with this stranger you met online, yeah, like that would by default be uncomfortable, I would think, from the perspective of a woman. And even, to a slight degree for me, although it's not a safety issue for me. But it's just weird, man. Like I've made friends with men and women in real life. Then I go and I text them afterwards. Like the vibe is totally different. And I can't even fully read their intentions over text the same way that I could in real life. So it's like, how the hell do you judge a partner from, a handful of exchanges over texting? Like, that's just crazy. And it's also kind of superficial. You mostly just base it off of seeing a picture of that person. And it's like, okay, this is one of the countless humans I've seen on the internet that I've just kind of like casually like not really cared about. It's kind of objectifying and dehumanizing just because you're just seeing a picture of the person. You're not actually seeing the person as the person.
Well, yeah, which is comparable to what everything we've talked about so far, because a lot of this hatred we're seeing towards each other is just so much of it's online. Like so much of it is online. Like how much of this in-person hatred do you really see?
Not very much.
Like how many times do people just go up to each other in real life, and then if they know they vote for someone else, they're just gonna start like talking to each other like they would online? I don't think they would, and they wouldn't do it just because they fear the consequences. Like, oh, I don't want to get in a fist fight. Oh, I don't want to get fired. You know what I'm saying? They're not just doing it. They're not just not doing it because of that. They're not doing it because they wouldn't. The idea would make them feel bad.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm gonna talk to another human being that way. That's disgusting. But you did talk to them that way when it was just text on a computer.
And it still hurt them, but you didn't see their pain.
Yeah. So what is it about that? Because in a way, it's like the person you're talking to is a real person.
Yeah.
But you're separated. There's an area of like detachment there. And it's funny because, yeah, there's things that we might say to someone online where it's like, oh my God, if I said that to someone in real life, I'd feel really bad about it.
Right. Yeah. I typically am pretty civil online, but especially when I was a teenager, man, like I've said some things like, yeah, like, man, I wouldn't say that now.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there. So what do we do about this?
It's a great question, man. We have to somehow, God. So here's another thing I wanted to bring up too, because this is kind of going to be speculative for us, but it might still be worth talking about. We haven't figured out what to do about the internet's impact on our ability to connect with each other properly. So what the hell are we going to do about AI? Like, we're really just on the brink of massive changes. It's already starting to happen, but it's just going to explode over the next year or two. It's like, we have to somehow embrace technology because it will not stop, while simultaneously not suffering the drawbacks of it, which I think means just having better connections in real life, And it's sad. I used to like to use the app meetup.com, and it was great. And then after COVID hit, and like ever since then, even today, so many of the events there are online only events. It's like, what's the point of even using the app? If you don't even have events in my city, or not very many, and they're, most of the ones in my city are online, why am I using Meetup? Like, we need something to help us, whether it's technological or otherwise, connect better on a human level. And I'm not sure what exactly that would be.
Yeah, this is not going to be an easy one because a lot of the solutions are just going to be abstract, and it can't be done through legislation. It just really can't. I mean, I don't even know, how would you legislate this? I mean, I think the idea almost sounds absurd, depending on, I guess, specifically what we're talking about. But like, first and foremost, I did take the liberty of having a couple points ready for this, because first and foremost, we need to understand that politicians and mainstream media figureheads and all those kinds of people are all slimy scumbags that will do and say anything for more power and more clicks. So, and that doesn't matter if you're right or left. I'm not just picking on MSNBC or anything like that. They all do this. They want the views, they want the clicks, they want the money, and they could care less the damage it causes to actual ordinary people and our connection. Like, oh, do you know that your your messages, the agendas you're pushing, they're doing this to people, these horrible things? Like, oh, okay, but look at my bank account.
Yep, precisely.
Look at the money we're making. This is just the reality, is that these kind of people, the only people that would want to go into these kind of positions are bad people. I'm sorry. Like, it's just, it attracts, I would argue, like sociopaths. So we need to, first of all, as normal people, which is like 99.99% of people, understand that politicians, mainstream media figureheads, they're all scumbags. They're always trying to lie to you. They're always trying to manipulate you, and they're always gonna twist the facts on all sides. So just understand that fact. Every time you hear something from these people, no matter what side they're on, they're trying to manipulate you. So we need to understand that first, which is another way of saying encouraging critical and independent thinking. Just don't assume that something's true because you saw it on the news or on the TV. Always assume at least the possibility that it's false and think about it critically, and then have a discussion with somebody about it. Figure out the truth together. Let the best ideas win. Understand each other's humanity while you're doing it. Blah, blah, blah. That's the first thing. And the second thing kind of goes into that, which is that it's not the disagreements themselves that cause hatred and division, but the way we go about talking about these disagreements. If you go to someone with a disagreement on any of these issues, and you assume if you basically don't treat them like they're even human, like you're a subhuman, then you're not going to get anywhere. You have to understand the common humanity.
I totally agree with all of that. I think you made some really good points. I think, we have to, so two things. One, on a cultural level, we have to evolve in a way that allows us to beneficially adapt to the technology that we have now. And technology is very good. I'm very, very pro-technology. And on some level, I'm inclined to be almost an accelerationist. But I just don't think that humans are currently evolving culturally fast enough for it to not be deleterious in a lot of very significant ways. So what you've said is great as kind of an outline for ways that we could try to individually live better and try to hopefully push the culture in a better direction that will actually allow us to benefit more from this technology rather than be hurt by it. And I think we also need to consider the practical side of things. The fact that people are rewarded for making people mad, and they're still the ones that are best suited on some level to give us our information. Because you're not going to go to someone who doesn't seem to be well educated, but also doesn't present the information in a fun way. As much as I hate to say it, we all kind of want our information to be enjoyable. That's kind of a prerequisite for things to become popular. And most people are not going to read scientific articles themselves. They're not going to read, the basic reports themselves. They want it presented in a fun way. So we need to practically figure out a better way for people to get information, and we also need to... This is not going to happen, but ideally a better way to select people who are going to govern us. I mean, the way we're selecting politicians is terrible right now because, as you said, it attracts sociopaths, and it rewards sociopaths. And that's a problem that's been happening ever since our nation started. It's just been getting worse and worse.
Yeah, I have no idea how to solve that, honestly. That would be very difficult, other than to maybe go back to the founding fathers and some of their ideas about how politicians should be, treated, basically. Let me tell you right now, if they could see now that politicians could become millionaires, they do become millionaires, that should just not even be legal. It should be in the job description that you cannot become rich during this job. You can make a decent wage, of course. And they should make a decent wage, of course. Everyone should make a decent wage. But you should be like a middle income earner at best as a politician. Because then people go into it just for the good reasons, but the fact that it's such a lucrative, and it's such a lucrative job position, you have millions. That should not be the case, and it really attracts greed. But that's almost, I don't know what to, there's nothing much more I can say about that. But I would say on a more important level, humanity level, first and foremost, misanthropy is becoming a real problem in our society.
It is.
And we need to start liking people better. There's so many anti-human sentiments. This is not even an anti-left, anti-right sentiment. I think that comes from this. So don't get me wrong, they are related. Like, if you have a hatred for the right or a hatred for the left, that kind of comes from a more, I would argue, just a hatred of humanity kind of philosophy. Like, look at how much, like, if you just talk to an average person, like, seriously, ask them, like, what do you think of people? Most people just say, like, they hate people. Like, I hate dealing with people. I hate talking with people. People annoy me. And look at how much more they prefer their pets. Now, I love dogs, don't get me wrong. But the fact that so many people love their dogs more than people is, I think, quite troubling. I think there are actual studies out there, actual like surveys that ask people, would you save a human being you don't know or save your dog? And the vast majority said they would save their dog. And I mean, it just seems like we need to kind of collectively understand that we are a social species. We live on this planet together, and there's value in being a human being, this inherent, unique value to being a human being that no other species on planet Earth has. It's not just the fact that we are living beings, and this is where it gets a little bit more spiritual and religious, I might add, because we have a unique human value that is infinitely greater than all other species on the planet. And we should really, acknowledge that in each other and treat each other thusly, not like we're just parasites.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think for a long time, we've had sentiments where people are like, oh, I hate talking to people. Like, oh, I have to go out today and interact with people. Like, there's coffee mugs, there's shirts, there's like all these things. And everyone's like, haha, that's so funny. I feel the same way. And it's just become very normalized to just be very pessimistic about the idea of interacting with another human being. And fundamentally, I think it is pessimism. Like, you don't like people, you're pessimistic about that interaction with a person. Well, okay, now it's doomed, because people always react. This is the secret of charisma. People will react the way you treat them. So if you go into a conversation with somebody and you expect it to be fucking amazing, and I've tried this with people and it fucking works. It's fun to see this happen. You go into a conversation, you just expect it to be like just a chill, like enjoyable time, And it turns into that. Then you go to another person. I've done this. And you just expect it to kind of be like, oh, awkward, pain in the ass. Like, okay, I don't want to talk to this person. And even if you think to yourself, I'm going to be nice, but then you have that pessimism in your head, it will turn out horrible. And it's wild. It's like fundamentally just optimism about other people that, makes or breaks it. And people avoid people in real life, and then they go on the internet where people are kind of at their worst, and then they get even more pessimistic. And it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy and a positive feedback loop. We just need people just need to touch grass and talk to other people more.
Yeah, and most people don't even believe, and this is the other point I want to make, is that most people don't even actually believe that deep down inside. It's a surface level thing. People say out loud, I hate people.
Yeah.
People are the worst. I would rather save a dog than a person. This is just things they say, but this is not, for the vast majority of people, they don't really believe it deep down inside. Like, if those same people were actually asked to genuinely make an effort to talk to another person, whether it just be at their job or whatever, they'd probably find that they like the person. They're like, oh, I actually kind of like you. What do you know? We're not actually so different. We're actually really not so different. I've talked to, I've been in the customer service industry now for over a decade. So I've had thousands and thousands of interactions with people, and just obviously from a trillion different backgrounds. I like people. Honestly, you can just talk with them, be like, oh, what do you know? They more or less are similar to me. They love music. They love films. They love their family. You find out that there is this kind of shared connection we all have as people who are empathetic, who have empathy and can care about each other. This shared connection that's really special. It's like a bond, and it's a bond you cannot have with an animal, period. It is a unique bond between people. And I think if most people just got out of this modern day misanthropic idea that's kind of poisoning their minds. And I'm not judging anyone, by the way. I've been there too. You don't think I have? Every single week I have weaknesses where I say, oh, I just want to hang out with my grandparents' dog. I don't want to hang out with people, but it's not the truth. It's not how we actually feel deep down inside.
Yeah. Well, I'd agree with that. We all have a strong desire for a connection with other people. And the loneliest, most painful feeling is having that strong desire and then feeling pessimistic that you can ever find someone that you want to have that connection with. And it makes you really miserable. Even just being optimistic about people in and of itself makes you feel better. But people are just very negative in general today, in my opinion.
Which is incredible because our lives are so much easier. That's what's amazing. It's that, why is it that misery and despair and depression, why is it that it's so much worse now than back in a day when life was objectively a million times harder? What happened? We had talked previously in another conversation about there being a lack of purpose, that people back in the day had more purpose. I think there's some cause of that too, because we really should have no excuse to be more miserable than people living in the past. What, are you kidding me?
It's the culture. It's 100% a cultural issue. And I really think that hardship, real hardship, gives people perspective sometimes, because we can invent problems to no end. People suffer from more negative emotion in wealthy societies than in non-wealthy societies from this article I read. And I didn't go back and fact check this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I would totally believe it anyway, because it intuitively makes sense that we kind of just invent our problems, and our culture finds things to be upset about and be pessimistic about. And, it's very unfortunate, because there is, as you said, we have so much safety and convenience and just ability in the modern era, and it's really incredible what we can do. There's really no limit. And I really do believe that it's possible for us to kind of have all of the benefits of modern living and to escape these problems that we have. And also on your note about purpose, I think that's part of why there's political division. People crave a purpose, and so maybe you find purpose in having this group that you hate online for lack of anything else, But you could also have purpose just with your social connections with other people in your life, and that would be a much better form of purpose. I found myself the most internet angry when I had the least people to have meaningful connections with, and have projects to work on and all of that and things to do.
Well, it's like that famous phrase, right? That good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times. It's kind of like that. I feel like that's kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah, I'd say to some degree that's true, but I don't think that there's any real need for it to be like that. I mean, we're already suffering. If you think, oh, it's good times, well, okay, it depends on how you think about it. It's good times in a medical sense, right? We're the least likely to die, right? But we have way more mental health issues.
Well, technology has made our lives easier too. It's not just medicine, but also so much convenience. We can text each other.
Sure.
We can look at think about getting around. Think about it. People used to have maps or something like that. I bet it's now we have GPS. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from the practical side too, yes, you're right. It is so much more of an easy time, but we're also suffering so much more.
It might be because of a self-fulfilling prophecy, though. I'm a huge critic of Big Pharma. I mean, I actually, if you want it, I'm not going to delve into this, don't worry, but I think they're the most evil industry that's ever existed on planet Earth. And I think they're largely responsible. I think this mental health crisis is largely self-fulfilled. And I think a lot of it's based on completely faulty science. And I think it's nonsense, honestly. I think a lot of these mental illnesses just come from over-medicalization and things like that. So actually, if you want to know a solution, I do think we're over-medicalized in society, and we need to get off that and just acknowledge that life is difficult, and that, of course, you're going to feel anxiety and depression. I mean, first of all, we always have death looming over us. That's a pretty good reason to feel anxiety. We're all going to die. We have rent to pay. We have, there's all sorts of things. And I do think that's actually a big cause of this mental health crisis, which also I think is a big cause of hatred and division and lack of purpose.
Well, the mental health crisis is also created by the convenience, and I agree with you. So I want to make a point here in a second about that. But you're correct that big pharma has the incentive, like it's corrupted insofar as its incentive is to make money off of people. And I believe there are really good people who are making really incredibly, just commendable strides in improving people's ability to get treatment that they need and developing new treatments and all of that. Like they're like, as far as the research side of pharma goes, it's fantastic. As far as the business side goes, yeah, like any business, it's corrupt because it just wants to make money, and it will treat people as objects to get money if it needs to. So that's a problem, and it's also the case that we know how to improve mental health to a large degree. Okay, running. On average, like if you run every day, on average, that has a better impact on your mental health than if you're depressed, you take antidepressants, right? Running, going and talking to other people, we know pretty well what things are correlated in your lifestyle with happiness. Connections with other real human beings is one of the main ones. And when I was depressed, the only thing that could get me out of it was I found connections with people. I made some really good friends, and that got me out of my depression that I'd been in for years and couldn't shake. The things that we used to have in the past that were protective against these issues are just things people are choosing not to engage with. And that's a big problem. And fundamentally, what needs to solve this is us being mindful with and also on the note of like people knowing how to fix mental health issues. We know things that will help it, and a lot of people advocate for this, like mindfulness and meditation and all of that. But like if you look at Buddhism, you look at Stoicism, there's so much wisdom that genuinely helps you improve your life, and meditating every day reshapes your brain. I mean, ever since I started looking more into Buddhism and trying to live a more Buddhist lifestyle, even though I'm an atheist, so I won't outright call myself a Buddhist, even
I think most Buddhists are atheist.
There's secular Buddhism, but it's weird. It's not really supposed to be totally divorced from the religious side, like people make it out to be in the West. But different mindsets change everything. And what we need to do to fix things in society is figure out what mindsets will really get us what we want, and where to put our time and our money and our votes in a way that actually gets us what we truly desire.
Yeah, I think it's worth. Yeah, so I agree with you completely. The mental health crisis could be essentially solved if people would just, instead of thinking like, oh, it's just a medical condition, I need to pump myself full of medicine that make these corrupt people billions. If they just exercised, made changes to their diet.
In a lot of cases, yeah. A decent percentage of them, for sure.
Yeah, I think if they exercise and had a good diet, that's another big thing, by the way. Having a good diet, a healthy social life, and lay off the internet. I would almost bet you, like, I would bet anything on this. Not that this would, we could ever test this, but I would almost bet anything that all those people out there that think that they have some kind of chemical imbalance and they need to take pills to balance them out, 95% of them would be like, oh, actually, no, I feel better now. They didn't need the pills at all.
I had a friend, a really good friend. She was very depressed. She's just been out of a really abusive relationship that lasted almost a year, right? So that obviously really can mess a person up. The thing is, I knew her for over a year, and she was on antidepressants since before I had met her. So she'd been on them for over a year, maybe closer to 2 years. And she wasn't really getting any better. And that's what was really scary and unfortunate. The doctors kept re-prescribing different medication for her over and over and over and over. And they all had different side effects, right? They all had weird effects on her body. But they didn't make her depression go away. And they messed up her ability to have a healthy sleep schedule and all of these things. And I'm just thinking in my brain, like, man, this thing might provide slight relief in the short term, but if it's messing up your sleep and everything, like, it's just, like, how do you fix depression even with antidepressants if you can't have a healthy lifestyle as a foundation for everything? Like a healthy, get all of your biological needs consistently met.
Well, there's a big incentive to not, because first of all, we live in a culture now that has essentially given up the idea of like accountability, and so you blame all of your problems on other things, and you don't want to look within. Oh, there's something wrong with me. No, it's just because I need to take pills and because there's chemicals in my brain that are completely out of my control or something like that. When in reality, people don't want to look internally and see what's going on with them. What choices are you making that are poor and that you have to change? And sometimes it's a hard jump you have to make. Even I'm in a position right now where I'm kind of in the middle of making a jump like that myself, where you have to stop drinking. That's a big thing. Stop drinking and stop eating. Like, I get it. Cheeseburgers are delicious and fast food is delicious and ice cream is delicious, but you gotta eat healthy. You gotta eat healthy. These are not easy choices. They're not. And you have to give up some sensory pleasure and make these choices. Okay, I don't want to exercise right now, but I'm going to do it. I don't want to eat healthy right now, but I'm going to do it. I don't want to give up my night beer right now, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to make healthy and good choices because there's something wrong with me. I am making poor choices. It is a flaw in me. And I have to make these difficult choices that are not easy, and then I'll get better. Most people just are turned off by that. It's just a fact. Most people are turned off by it.
Yeah, totally. It's that's really important stuff to even be able to recognize. Alcohol and weed and everything, they're I think of them as like short-term band-aids. They can make you feel better in the moment. The only times I've really felt better and like fixed my emotional issues, because I developed this like little technique that I use. I'll like write down or even make a video log for myself of just talking about the things that I don't want to talk about, the painful things. I'll really look within, even if it hurts, even if I don't want to remember if there's a certain thing or I don't want to admit that I believe something. Like, I talk about what hurts because your feelings are what point you in the direction of what matters. And you have to address that. It will never go away. Antidepressants, alcohol, like whatever, they can help you in the short term, man, but they will not help you fix things fundamentally. The fundamental thing that you always need is to really process whatever your brain is not processing. I used to smoke weed all the time, and I started smoking weed in the mornings, and my friend was like, she's like, why are you doing this? Is this really the life you want to live? And she like really, as she's like, I'm like, I can function, it's fine. And she's like, okay, but like, why? Like, even if you can function, you say it's not a problem. Like she encouraged me to really think about my choices, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to smoke weed anymore, and I gave it up, and I have not smoked weed since. It goes back to the same thing with what we were talking about with the internet. It's convenience, and your point about giving up sensory pleasure is relevant because you're giving up short-term improvement, for long-term benefit. It's like the difference between having a conversation with a stranger on the internet versus having one in real life. I could talk to a dozen strangers right now. In the next minute, I could talk to so many people online. And it would be convenient. But I don't do that anymore because it's just so rewarding to spend that same time, even for a chance at a connection with a real person.
So in conclusion, I think I think the first step in solving the division between others is looking within ourselves and figuring out what is the cause of these hateful, divisive feelings. And you might find that once you make the choices in your life, you can't worry about others. So there's sometimes a defeatist attitude, like, oh, I could, but that won't make any real difference. Like, you can't have that attitude. You're right. You can't control what other people do. And you could be the only one on planet Earth that does this. And that might suck, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So look inside yourself, make the changes in your life that will improve your mental health. And then I think every single thing else, every other thing will come from that. It doesn't mean we won't still have differences. It doesn't mean we won't still get into arguments. And we won't have differing ideas and things like that. It doesn't mean any of that. But we'll handle it in a much more healthy way where we don't forgo each other's humanity. Figure out how to improve your life.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good point.
So I think for me, these are just my final thoughts, which are to figure out the problems in your own life and make good, healthy choices. Eat healthier, exercise, stop doing social media, or at least limit it greatly. And then after that, improve your connections with other human beings. Look at them as other human beings with infinite value, not as an enemy, not as a leftist, not as a right winger, but as a human. And think about every single issue, every single one, critically, and always assume there's a possibility you could be wrong and get to the bottom of the truth. And I think that if we do those things, then society, this division, it'll disappear.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. And so you made a very good point. You need to do it just for you. You don't need to just look at other people and say, oh, these other people are infinitely valuable. Look in the mirror and say, that person is infinitely valuable. And I'm going to make my life better for you, right? Like, I'm going to try to be a better person for me. And I don't need any other reason to try to be better than just that, my life has meaning. And if you can do that and you can make those improvements, you kind of no longer are dependent on what other people say or do. And what's cool too is you can give people the gift of inspiration. As you genuinely improve your life, other people notice. And when they see you improving your life, you inspire them. Because if they're like, my God, this person's like doing way better in a week, and they might ask you questions. And some of my best experiences with other people were just, seeing how they valued themselves and improved themselves. And I was like, my God, how did you do this? Like, we just have a conversation about it. And that in and of itself is a massive positive force for every aspect of society.
I think that's all there is to it, man. I think sometimes we might have a habit of like overcomplicating certain things. But I think these solutions are actually pretty simple. Now, whether they'll happen or not, I don't know. It'll be like a generational thing to figure out. It's certainly not going to be an overnight thing.
It's true.
These are the simple solutions. Take it or leave it kind of thing.
I really feel like that's what it has to be. I'm optimistic overall. I genuinely think that people are waking up a little bit more and being more mindful of the impact of their choices in their own lives. And hopefully, AI will be able to play a positive force in this whole thing. I mean, it could be either wonderful or terrible, Maybe we can talk about that in the next episode.
Let's do it.
All right, and with that, thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you tuning in. I have been Josh.
And I'm Joseph.
Go ahead and drop your thoughts down below and tune in next week for another Perfect Thursday.